well, I don't think Rishad necessarily needs any introduction, but I'm going to have him briefly introduce himself. I know David Kirkpatrick also maybe wanted to ask a question, and I'll just invite David to join on any time in the conversation here. Rishad, thanks so much for joining us. There's David as well. So for those of you who don't know you, Rishad, please introduce yourself.
Sure. I am an author, an advisor, and a speaker, I guess. And prior to which I spent 38 years since I was unemployable anywhere else at a company called Publicis.
Oh, wonderful! It's really great to have you here. Tell us, what's your day in the life like now?
Well, it's starting to transition, as has been mentioned in the previous panel, but the days have involved no travel. I used to travel 120 times a year, and I have only traveled 6 times this year, 6 flights, and all of those occurred after the vaccine, and all of them to New York City to see our daughters, and that's about it. I speak much more than I ever used to, so I keep a running count. So this is my 81st webinar this year, and add to it 20 podcasts, and so I do that. I'm particularly active in writing, so even post my book, I have this thought letter on Substack, and then most of my time actually goes into a advisory business where I advise startups, private equity, large companies, as well as my own place of work.
That's great. And we actually very early on in the pandemic.
That's not a day in the life. That's a year in the life.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
But Rishad, we chatted in April, not long after the pandemic started. So I want to sort of go back to some of those, go back to that conversation and some of the points. But let me just start with, as you look back at the last 16 months, and whether you want to incorporate some of that earlier conversation or not, what's bubbled to the top of your head in terms of, particularly as it relates to this conference is about the post-pandemic consumer, and you filter the last 16 months, and what comes to mind?
So I would say there are 4 things that come to mind. The first one is that I believe that when you take people through a financial, social, health, and emotional crisis all over the world for 12 to 15 months, they're going to come out different. So I basically am strongly recommending to people not to use the word new normal, but to use the word the new strange. Now, the new strange might be, revenge consumption for a few months or whatever it is, but I truly believe people have come out different because they've been exposed to a certain amount of fragility, fear, uncertainty, and anxiety, and it's made them rethink things. You see that, for instance, in a recent study that said that 40% of people are thinking of changing jobs. So that's one. The second one is that a lot of folks, I think, are misunderstanding that there isn't going to be a hybrid work culture. They use the word hybrid. So just like I say, don't use the word new normal, I say, please don't use the word hybrid. I believe what we're going to see is the unbundled office or the unbundled workplace. And what I mean by the unbundled workplace is we're going to work in 4 potential places, not 2. Hybrid, we think about office and home, but my basic belief is it's 4 places. I call the home. I don't call the office. I call it the museum. Because for all practical purposes, it's where the artifacts and historic documents are, some of the rooms that you take people through tours, and where the senior people like roosting. Okay, that's about it. Right. But for the real benefits that you need to get people together, and people do want to get together without a doubt, you can do that outside of the museum and outside of the home, both at a distributed or satellite offices closer to people's homes, so they don't have to basically travel an hour and a half, as well as do what companies like Automatic do, which is create experiences maybe once a quarter, either around events or on locations. So you can get training, collaboration, networking there, as well as you can get it in the museum.
Right.
And the other is don't think about 2 to 3 days a week. Think about 1 week a month. It gives people much more flexibility. So that's sort of a second one. And those are just, two. And the third and fourth, very quickly,
Yeah.
is the third one is that because we are at the confluence of new mindsets and a new technology age, which I call the third connected age, there's probably going to be more wealth creation and as well as increased competition to all existing incumbents. And I think there's another word I try to get people not to use, which is restarting. I try to get them to think about starting afresh because it puts you in a last mindset. And the last one, without a doubt, is we've all begun to realize, and I wrote about this 2-3 weeks ago, that there are 4 words that we never used to pay attention to, but those 4 words are going to be very special moving forward. And the 4 words are ordinary. Okay? We just want to get back to ordinary because what we've gone through is extraordinary. So we're going to just, whatever we do, meet a friend, go to a bar, the ordinary is going to be very important.
Right.
The second one really is going to be endings. We like this ending, but we've also seen life endings. We've seen a lot of endings. So we're going to basically, and that might be part of the revenge and etc. But we're beginning to realize that life is fragile. The third one basically is enough. A lot of people are basically asking, how much do we actually need? And the other one is less. As most people will tell you, they used far fewer things than they needed, right? And it wasn't the lack of using those things that made you unhappy. It was the other things, the freedom, the friends. So that, again, that emotional rewiring, I think major marketers and media companies have to think about.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I'm most interested in hearing from you, because I agree, we were talking about revenge living the last 2 days, and whether it's a summer of revenge living or even going into holiday, maybe G from Kara just talked about a holiday season that might also be somewhat revenge. I'm curious on the other side of all that, and what has happened to all of us, not consumers but humans, as you like to say.
Yeah.
That when we're done with this sort of revenge period and the 4 words and then the 4 points that you just made, what sticks? Like, we've had 16 months to change habits.
I think what sticks is, again, different people, different things will stick with different people in different countries. But I think the things that are likely to stick the most is a underlying realization about our humanity, which basically means that it's both human frailty, but also human relationships and purpose and values. So to me, purpose and values, all of that will be very clear. In the business world, I think what's going to stick is a new ESG. So I've been advising a lot of boards and saying, look, the existing ESG is very good, but there's a new ESG that is supplementing, not replacing. So the existing ESG was environment, social, and governance, all of which are important. But something is far as important, and obviously these are important, which is employee, society, and government. So I truly basically believe that in marketing, the most important metric will be employee joy, which is, can you basically make your employees joyful as possible? If so, you will increase retention, customer service, innovation, and ideas. So there's going to be a massive focus on employees, and this is something companies can do something about. Right. Society is, how is your company thinking about society, right? So I've already written about this for 2 years, where most digital marketing and most digital marketing platforms, leaders are now, unfortunately, it's taken them 3-4 years, right, are beginning to grapple that they're not running advertising operating systems. They're running society operating systems. And they need to be managed and they need to be dealt with as society operating systems. And that's just for them. For everybody, it's like, what society? And G is government. It's always been fun to basically say all the time from, Reagan, that, people laughed when people said government is here to help you. We have now learned that good government and bad government makes a difference. and companies need to basically work with government.
Indeed, indeed. Look, you're an economist by trade as well, so I do want to touch on the consumer economy side of things and go back to a few things you said back then, and then
Sure.
whether you see it's still relevant today. We had talked about in April, the week before you came on, we had Rita McGrath, and she had said the consumer dollar is up for grabs, every dollar, yen, and euro, and you had talked about the loss of pricing power, and whether we'll see sort of this high margin economy. I'm wondering if reflecting back on those thoughts and kind of where we are economically, it's this weird point where we're coming back, the economy's reopening, we're seeing inflation rise, but people are still frugal because of what happened to them. Where do you see sort of this consumer economy, particularly as it relates to brands and pricing power and this high margin economy, as you call it?
So for a short term, and since I am an economist, I'm not as good as the economists at the Fed. So I'm going to basically believe in the Fed more than I believe, let's say, in Larry Summers, who's also very smart, and that the current phase of pricing pressure that's going on is primarily because the economy is coming back online. So what you're basically seeing is it took time to shut down supply, and now demand has come back much faster than people expected. Also because of we didn't expect the CDC to say 8 days ago everything would be fine. So there's a supply-demand imbalance, and so supply is coming up, and demand is going much more than it used to be because of suppressed stuff. So as a result, you sense that there is some sort of pricing power. I believe that the pricing power will disappear very quickly, including, I believe, interestingly, in the next year, potentially the pricing power of the platforms won't disappear, but will be lessened. And here are 3 reasons for why I think pricing power is going to disappear. One is every company recognizes that their number one cost is employees. Every board has recognized they can now attract and retain employees from anywhere in the world, including for white-collar jobs. Okay? Now, that's really good for people who are very good. If you're really good, you have global demand. But at the same time, you've got global competition. Right? And so everyone's going to basically say, we have fractionalized everything, including Airbnb and Uber. Why haven't we fractionalized work? So that is one thing that I don't think people realize how dramatic this experience is on what I call the gig economy, where all of us are gig workers. So that's one. Second is, for the last 3 years, if you listen to anybody at the board level, forget about what CMOs say. And CMOs are really bright, but they are very careful because they have to manage their careers. Okay. And as a result, they don't say what's really on their minds, even though they're amazingly smart and know exactly what's going on. But at the board level, which is what I'm now working, they don't like the fact that they don't have as much strategic optionality and that they are held with a gun to their head on pricing power. The black box of the auction model, the inability to switch. So there's a whole federation of new companies that are coming to basically help in that area. Now, we are thinking first of what I call some of the dwarfs, who are now becoming bigger than dwarfs, which are the Pinterests and the TikToks and the Twitters, et cetera, of the world, right? And the Snaps, all of which, by the way, if you had invested in a year ago, you do better than the big 4, just to give you an idea. But there's a massive federation of new technologies like Firework, which is a B2B thing, which is going to basically give power back to the publisher and the marketer, which is very significant. And again, with a lot of marketers thinking about first-party data, they're basically trying to remove the total leverage like that the platforms have on pricing power. So that's the second. Besides employees, there'll be that one. And the third is almost everything that we're doing is increasingly we're replacing carbon with silicon. Now, I won't say what the impact of society is, but we're replacing carbon with silicon, which is we're replacing human beings with machines, and machines have amazing economies of scale. And we're about to have quantum jumps in what technology can do.
Indeed. And talking about sort of, federation of these new types of companies, and even though the big boys are doing it, I want to switch to content a little bit with things like Warner Discovery and Amazon MGM in the news. And looks like the one thing that absolutely accelerated in the last 16 months was just the rise of streaming, even though the trend was certainly well on its way. And, you know, will we see consolidation there? And, you know, we talk about content production and diminishing cost to produce, and why do you need these big, massive studios? But, you know, did Amazon buy MGM in part, not just for the library, but their content production expertise? I don't know. But how do you see this sort of streaming landscape and big media and big studios? And with a lot of this, is some of it's ad supported, and the ad supported share is growing actually, but still a disproportionate share is with no ads. So
people who have written very smartly about this, I'm just going to use their thinking, which is both Ben Thompson at Strategy and Jessica Lessin at The Information. You know, Jessica Lessin basically wrote that after a decade of all these people hanging out at the Allen conference, which apparently happens next week, all their thinking was wrong. Distribution is not power, right? What Ben Thompson says, demand is power, the ability to aggregate demand. And that's what the platforms were doing, versus these other folks were thinking it was distribution power. Distribution is actually being unbundled. Demand is being bundled. That is one particular thing. The second is power is also increasingly moving to the creator. So it's interestingly, is that the power is moving to either the creator or the demand generator, and not to the distribution platforms.
And interesting, and I'll only interrupt you for just 1 second, only because I just read a great article on all this talk about big media, Amazon, Warner, Discovery, AT&T. There's a great article on Sony.
Yeah.
That talked about the value of the studio's 30 billion. And they're just saying, look, we're not selling, and we are just going to produce content. Like they never, you know, they had Crackle, but they didn't really like, you know.
Yeah, so it's the content, the people who create content and who can generate demand, right? And the only machine part of that works is if you can have franchise models like Disney, which you can repeat. But otherwise, you know, it's people who create demand. But as importantly, you're also beginning to see more and more of the money. You know, when you think about it, when platforms like Facebook occurred, basically they followed a Tom Sawyer model. They basically you paid them to paint their fence. Right? So you brought your content, your network, and your information, and they gave you likes. Okay, that was, and at some stage someone woke up and said, what the shit is this? Okay, so now what's basically happening, you're beginning to see much more money, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, you know, whether it's everything from, you know, a lot of people are now basically saying we want a disproportionate share. It's part of the reason for the Apple Epic subs thing of what's going on, right? It's one of the reasons for why only fans can't be on an app, because they give 80% of the stuff to the fans. So there's a big part that I'm trying to get people to realize that, you know, Kim Kardashian has more engagement during a week than the combined ratings of the Oscar and the Super Bowl.
Right.
So forget about, I mean, this is the biggest challenge that I think marketers and boards have, always one step behind.
Right. And Taylor Swift the same way, right? You put those two together and it's an awesome amount of reach, and the big media has zero control.
And you know, and I did an experiment, you know, you read my weekly thing. I just want to like learn about Substack, right? Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm just going to try it as an experiment. And before I knew it, I got into writing it once every week, and I've done it now for 41 weeks. But I did a statistical thing with my little math, right? So I did some stuff and I explained it to people. And once I explain it, I don't have to explain anymore as to why you need to take power back from the platforms. Okay. And it was very simple. I still publish on it, but I don't write on it. I had a WordPress blog. Okay. And I would write on WordPress, and then I would distribute or promote it on all the social media platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. My duplicated reach was about 65,000 people. My unduplicated reach is probably 30,000 people. In the course of a week after I would publish, I would get, if I was lucky, right, about 1,000 people to read me using that word.
Right.
Then I started my Substack. And my Substack was completely opt-in. So I didn't even like use my Rolodex and mail people out. I just said, hey, I'm starting to write once a week. It's completely free. If you want, you can sign up and you'll see what you get. You know, go to rishad.substack, sign up, right? the average day, the average week now, I get 25,000 readers. Okay, I own the email list, I own the content. It's night and day, and if a starving author can do it, no marketer should not.
David, I see you popped on, so I know you have a question. We always
Well,
have
I'm
millions
just
of
in
questions.
awe. I'm in awe. I really love the way, I've always loved the way you think, Rishad, and I'm processing many things you've said. I'm really taking a total cop out because I can't even think of how to dig down. But somebody in the Q&A asked a very good question about privacy and asserts that consumers are coming out of the pandemic caring much more about it. And I guess I'd be curious if you would respond to that question, first of all.
Yes, so I believe that privacy is going to grow more and more important. And anecdotally, what we're hearing is a majority of people are not letting people, when they're given the option, right, whether you want someone to track you or not track you. I mean, I've seen numbers as high as 90% saying do not track, but whatever, a majority basically are saying do not track. I think the very simple way of explaining privacy is I'm going to state a line. And that's my belief on privacy. And once I say it to somebody who says privacy doesn't matter, they think again.
Yeah.
Here's my definition of privacy.
So
My definition of privacy very quickly is this. You are not yourself when someone is watching.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm very intrigued by your many statements that suggest that power of the platforms is diminishing. So if power is moving back to publishers and marketers, I mean,
slowly, it's a 3 to 5 year journey, right? And that's got nothing to do with stock prices. That's got nothing to do with stock prices. Because people say their stock price goes up. I said that's got nothing to do with anything.
Is power also moving back to the individual?
Yes. It is basically moving into the individual because the individual today has major technologies, especially if the individual can do the following things. I've been fixated and advising a lot of people on why they need to build a brand for themselves. And one reason is I believe we're all going to be gig workers. You might as well be known so people can reach out to you to help them on their projects. But the second one is your resume is going to be the first page of Google in the United States, right? It's not going to basically be even your LinkedIn profile. It'll be some LinkedIn, but they'll first discover you on Google, then they'll go to LinkedIn. But the biggest way that they discover you is based on your perspectives, your points of view, your provocations, and your plans of action. I call the 4 Ps. Whether you write it, say it, dance it, talk it, that becomes extremely important. If you do that, right, the ability to leverage that at a global scale, and if you want to monetize it, is incredible, is absolutely incredible. And what people don't realize is, yeah, I give this weekly thought letter. People say this is amazing and you're giving it away for free. I said, yeah, it's a way to give back, and I like giving back. And if I charge, no one would read me anyway, so might as well give it for free. But what tends to basically happen is I now have a direct channel with 20,000 people, including 150 CEOs and 5,000 C-level executives, right? And that, by the way, they help me monetize in lots of different ways. So and the new technologies that are coming, which I've begun to see for the individual, are enormous and amazing.
But is there an equivalent of that? I mean, let's face it, you're the elite of the elite, and you're sort of making points that apply primarily to the elites. What is the equivalent, if any, of that for, the average, middle American would-be QAnon supporter or whatever? I mean, is there an equivalent that's happening at a much more sort of fundamental level of societal interaction? Because, I mean, in a way, that's what Facebook tried to be when it first came along. It was an empowerment of the individual as a platform. I'm just curious if you see something going on at a more quotidian level that's comparable.
Well, in many ways, Facebook is for everybody and has, the fact that we are dealing with QAnon and everybody talks about the power of individuals to start movements, right? Because when you actually think about it, it's the same individual that's basically using their technology with 35 different names or 35 different things and going and making that happen. So an individual can scale and become multiple individuals utilizing this. That happens to be one of the things which doesn't require any knowledge of technology. Like, so I think the skills are becoming, but the other one is for everybody to become a creator. I mean, if you think about TikTok, outside of the big names, most of them are just you and me and a dog named Boo, right? And those things are going to become easier and easier. And there's one thing that I think that's particularly, that I would suggest everybody to look at, and I think it's online, it's definitely online. Look at it's about 7-8 days ago, when Snap talked about augmented reality and what they're doing with augmented reality. That's basically one. Go look at what a company called Firework is doing in trying to basically create plug and play, less than 15, 20 minutes. It basically gives you all the storytelling capabilities of Instagram on any platform in the open web, okay? And all of those free, no technology costs, not free, but close to free, no technology knowledge, and a full palette of tools depending on what your passion is. So if you're a cook, if you're a car welder, or whatever, I mean, a car, if you fix cars, you can do amazing things and reach audiences. So I do believe it's coming. The big difference is in many of these models, there's a direct monetization platform as much as, and also there is a fame building, reputation building platform.
So I'm going to jump in and a little bit of a programming note here. I'm going to ask one more question of Rishad. We had a previously scheduled, which is still on, VIP session for the DX Daily subscribers and some Techonomy members that was going to start at approximately 5:10 or so. Rishad has graciously said that he'll answer a few questions over there. And for all those who stuck around through the end of the day and through the full 3 hours, we're going to put a link in the chat string right now. And we invite all of you, once we're done here, we're just going to jump over to this other link. Rishad, that link, you'll use the same link as well.
Sure.
And Rishad will answer a few more questions. It's a little bit more of an open Zoom environment where you can be on video if you like, and you get to ask the questions. So finally, Rishad, for this more public session right here, before we move over to the VIP session, I've always been curious. I've never asked you this question, just in terms of how do you stay informed and inspired as a, as a marketing leader, now an author and a futurist? What do you read? Whether it's sort of industry specific or just more broadly, or even
I read all that.
Yeah.
And I can show you if I go that way, it surrounds my room and then it's the screen. So here's what I do. I do 3 simple things. Okay. I spend 1.5 hours a day learning. I do that from 4:30 to 6 every morning. It's a little bit easier when I'm not traveling. So I do that 4:30 to 6. What is that? It's everything from, I might hear something, David might say something, and I'll say, David on most days is smart. He said something and I have no clue what the hell he's saying. So instead of basically saying David is an idiot, I say, he said something I don't understand or I don't agree with. Let me go investigate. So I basically either, look at YouTube videos or go online, or if there's a book or someone tells me there's a book, I go read the book. So that's one thing that I do. The second thing that I do is I build a case for the exact opposite of what I'm recommending. So any point of view, I will give you the exact opposite of point of view, and I'll be quite strong about the opposite point of view. But obviously, when you're asking me to recommend, I'm going to give you what I really believe. But I've actually thought about the other point of view. Like, individuals do not matter. Platforms take complete control. I can build a case for that. But now we've got to understand enough to build the other one. And the third is one that is probably the one that keeps me honest, because I could read and fake it, is I actually do these things. So, I remind people I was at Rishad on Twitter, and I was almost 50 years old when Twitter came out. I was running a 10,000 person company, and people said, why are you wasting your time with these things, right? I started seeing writers I liked and admired going to Substack. So I said, what the hell is that? And I learned about it and I started doing it. And my basic belief is whether you're a client, an agency, a media company, people quickly figure out whether you actually are doing it, even if you're doing it sloppily and you don't know what the hell you're doing, versus faking it. And I think the days of faking it are over. And so I'm really terrified that people will realize I'm a fake, so I'm working hard at it.